I thought, since we've got lots of time together in the next couple of days, hopefully, that we'd probably start at the beginning and find out a little bit about where you were born. I guess it was pretty close to here in Winfield.
Right. We were born in Arc City, which is a town south of here. And that was a long time ago, 1925, actually.
1925. Yeah. And from there, where did you grow up?
In Arc City, and then I went to junior college there. And I have two brothers. Another one is also my kid brother, which is 18 months younger than I am. Was an orthodontist for the Arabian American Oil Company and trained their dental staff over in Arabia. Mm-hmm. And then my younger brother, is about 9 years younger than I am, is the world's greatest authority on Robert and Elizabeth Browning. Mm-hmm. And he has an office at the British Museum. And he has an office here in Winfield. And he produces the documentary, or actually the documents of Browning's in the 50s to wherever. And
did that start off as a hobby for him?
No, he when he was in the third grade, he read the poem. Was it The Ring in the Book or whatever? One of the Browning poems, and he was totally taken by it. And so when he got into the fourth grade, the teacher in our rural school in Kansas City, there were three daughters that were teachers. One had first, second, third, and fourth grade, and the other had fifth and sixth, and the other had the seventh and eighth grade. And so they, so when he went to the fourth or fifth grade to another teacher, that teacher just flew all apart, and she went next door to the classroom for her sister and just cussed her out royally. She said, "This kid hasn't learned a thing, and you haven't taught him a single solitary thing." But he really knew the Browning material, and he was totally fascinated by it. And from that, he's never deviated. We went to Baylor University
together.
Well, I was graduate basically by the time he went.
Okay.
But and Baylor University has one of the major collections of Browning material, mm-hmm. and he's added to it tremendously. And even this last summer, there was a castle in France that during the Browning's era in the 1800s, the literary critic of that day was in France, and all the people would send their manuscripts and first edition copies of their books signed and everything to this critic. And my brother uncovered all that, and he got several hundred first edition books from Carlyle and Browning and everybody else in that era. Mm-hmm. And he's made quite a dent in the literary world. And he
lives here in Winfield as well?
When he's not in London. He actually has received personally by himself more grants than any college or university from the government because of his tremendous understanding, and the way he writes the grants is unbelievable. They send out these applications to various professors around the world, and all the reports come back, says give him anything he wants. There's nobody on the earth can do as much for that price that you can possibly get. And he just keeps on getting grants and grants and grants, which is quite remarkable.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me one second, I'm just going to make sure this mic is
working.
It is too good.
Okay.
So it's you and two brothers?
Yes.
You and two brothers.
Yeah.
And your other brother, who is an orthodontist as well, did he go to Baylor as well?
He graduated from Southwestern here. Okay. And also from Baylor. And I think he has 2 degrees from here and 3 from Baylor. And also he went to dental school in Kansas City, Missouri. Mm-hmm. And
how many years between the two of you?
The 18 months between.
Oh, okay.
With the orthodontist between me and my second brother.
Mm-hmm. So you had a pretty normal childhood growing up. I mean,
Well, yes, I had told the mark. That's a problem that we have in our civilization today, that the stupid, diabolical government won't let the teachers or the mother and father discipline the children, and they just grow up wild and ignorant and everything else. And that's the downfall of our civilization, actually.
But that's not the case in your
No.
family?
My mother raised her voice and threatened to snatch me bald-headed if I didn't do exactly what she said. And
Yeah.
so it was, and even the teachers in Arkansas City, they just had a paddle hanging on the wall, and they used it every day on somebody.
Yeah.
And
Well, I grew up with that same
era.
era. Yeah, it wasn't too long ago.
But it wasn't as long ago as mine. But anyhow, that's, and so all three of us evidently got our doctorate degrees, and, and eventually I earned 6 degrees, but I was so, I had such a run-in with the trustees at Baylor University that I only picked up 3 or 4 of them, I forget.
What does the MS stand for after your name?
Master of Science in organic chemistry and education and things like that.
In growing up, and this is my father, and you're about the same age,
yeah.
I wanted to ask you, the food that the family used to put on the table back in the, say, the 30s or the 40s, what have you noticed in terms of the way we feed our families?
Well, first of all, we grew it ourselves in those days. And second of all, we didn't have any engineered or genetically altered foods, which are quite devastating to the civilization, to the health, actually. And it's unfortunate. We grew our own garden every year, and
Yeah.
and we had to work like a Turk to survive, which was a blessing. And I think that probably in our civilization now, that God in all of his infinite wisdom will take us to the woodshed and give us a real licking, I guess, or beating. And if we have total poverty here soon, why, we might make something out of the next generation, but I don't know. It's kind of doubtful.
Well, let's see. It would have been what year were you diagnosed with cancer?
I think it was in 63.
63. So that would have put you at about
I don't know,
35 years of age.
35 or 6, something where in that area.
Yeah.
I remember right.
Yeah.
Actually, what I did was I kept passing out, and the third time I woke up in the hospital, I was laying there in the hospital bed, and my wife was over in the corner crying, and my 2 best friends were, one was a board-certified internist and cardiologist, and the other one was a surgeon, a board-certified surgeon. And I said, well, what's going on, boys? And they said, well, he said, we got good news for you and bad news. And I said, well, lay it on me. And they stepped a little closer to my bed, the hospital bed, and said, well, good news is that it's not your heart that's giving you any trouble. And I said, what's the bad news? They said, you got terminal pancreatic cancer. And so I said, oh, that's okay. I said, just cut it out and throw it away, and I'll go on. And I was producing evidently too much insulin and causing the blackouts, because I was going into insulin shock evidently, because the tumor mass was in the pancreas. And then and the surgeon stepped up to the bed a little closer, and he said, I wouldn't have you on the table, you'd die on the table. And he said, I'm not going to have that on my reputation. And then I said, well, what am I going to do? And they looked at each other and stepped a little closer to the bed and said, get our kids' teeth straightened quick. And
these are your 2 friends.
Right. And I had 2 children from each of these physicians as orthodontic patients. And they, the nearest orthodontist, I was in West Texas, the nearest orthodontist was 300 miles away. And they just said, we don't want to drive every 2 weeks to 300 miles to have an orthodontic adjustment for our children. So get them straightened as quick as you can. And from that point on, I never took another orthodontic patient because they told my wife I had 2 months, and they told me at the bedside there that I might have 6 months.
Yeah.
And so that's where it all started. And then,
How had your diet been, though, up to that point? Did your
well,
diet
I was like
change
a
from...
Ubangi that was jumping and hopping around at a white missionary boiling. I would eat every cow steak that came by, and that was I just overindulged in meat. You know,
Was that, growing up, though, was that a part of the family diet, a lot
well, it
of
was a
meat?
little. You know, we didn't have enough money to have that much, but since I was an orthodontist, well, we could afford, and we had a lot of steak and. But of course, we didn't even have the junk food we have now. But I don't know how the civilization survives now.
Well, at the time that you were diagnosed with cancer, then you had already earned your Master's of Science in
And two
biochem
doctorates, and
and
yeah,
2 doctorates. So you had a fair idea of nutrition, and
right. But
this was
you
sort of a
don't
wake-up.
practice what you preach.
Practice what you preached. And
Right.
like you say, I guess this was a pretty big wake-up call.
It was. God slapped me upside the head with a 2 before and got my attention real quick.
Well, where do you go from there when somebody tells you you got 6 months to live?
Well, that was quite a shock, of course, to anybody. And then you just you get down and pray a little bit, and God just said, basically told me what to do. Actually, when I was 5.5 years old, I was out in the sand pile in our backyard playing, and Christ appeared to me and said, "You're going to be a medical missionary." And I did, at 5.5, I didn't know what a medical missionary was. And so I ran screaming into the house and asked my mother what a medical missionary was. But he didn't tell me where I was going to be. He didn't realize, I didn't realize, I thought I wanted to go to Africa. The Belgian Congo is actually where I wanted to go. And that's why I went to Baylor to, part of my degrees are in religion and education and everything else. But I ended up here to the most pagan nation on earth, which is Americans. So here we are, we're slaughtering our children and babies, and we're killing each other with all kinds of wicked, wild things.
Well, what happened? I mean, after when you're diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, which even to this day is terminal, and I guess
It's always terminal. The only people that's ever survived pancreatic cancer are the ones on my program. I had a 100% cure rate during on those people that did what I told them to.
Yeah.
And there's no one has ever survived pancreatic cancer in any other form of treatment except mine.
Yeah, I guess on the records from conventional medicine, if they diagnose it early enough,
They can
and they
survive
make it
2 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But so, what did you do? What was the first after
Well, we
being
got
given that news? What do you do?
well, we changed our diet immediately, and we stopped getting the eating the meat, and because it was in the pancreas, then I went to the health food store and got as much pancreatin as they could order for me, and I was going to at least digest what food I was eating. And then we got some goats, and we got a goat, and the first goat was to make goat's milk, which was a good food, and goat's milk yogurt. And we kept the goat out in our fenced-in swimming pool. And so we had goat's milk, and one day the dog catcher came by and says, "We can't have a goat in town." And I said, "Well, there's no law against it." He said, "Well, then you're a dog catcher anyhow." And I said, don't bother me. And so then the city council sent an invitation to come to their next meeting, and so they said, "We'd like for you to take your goat out of town and put it out to the edge of town." And I said, "Oh, why don't you ask me in the first place?" And I said, "Well, you're lucky." I said, we had, at that time, we had 3 adopted children. And I said, "The children need milk, and you're fortunate, because I planned to get a gorilla for having milk for their children, but yeah, I can't get any import license for that." And so they died laughing. And then we moved the goat out to the edge of town. I found a farm there that would.
Where were you living at the time?
In Midland, Texas.
Midland, Texas.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't allow a goat, even though there's probably 1 million head of cattle.
Well, they
Within
wouldn't in town. This was in town in
Oh, I see.
a fancy part of town.
So when did you, what happened that would lead you to feel better? I mean, how did you know whether you're making progress or making it worse?
Well, whenever your malignant tumor masses are being digested, you feel worse. So taking the pancreatin and changing the diet in about 2 or 3 weeks, I felt a whole lot worse. I felt I was dying, and then I had to stop for 4 or 5 days taking the enzymes while my body cleaned out the poisons. And that's one of the keys to surviving the treatment, and it's also the key to know that it's working, because you feel a lot worse than when you stop for 4 or 5 days taking the enzymes, and your body can dump out the toxins and poisons. Then you feel again, and you have to start over and go through it again. And at one point you get to the point where you are afraid you're going to die, and then a little later you're afraid you're not going to die because you're so sick, and that's the problem. At last, my recovery took about 18 months. After that, I developed a program that just takes about 6 or 8 months to really resolve the biggest problem, and then from then on, once you have a damaged pancreas, or the pancreas fails, you'll have to take some form of enzyme the rest of your life. I still take 2 or 3 enzyme tablets with each meal.
Mm-hmm. But back then in '63, would you have anticipated the goopy, sick feeling that you were going to get from taking this pancreatin?
No.
So you didn't know if you were doing yourself better or worse?
No, you think you're going to kill yourself, but
yeah.
When you stop, you begin to feel better and afraid you think you might make it, and then you decided, well, I decided I will take some more, and it was the cyclic process, because you have to destroy the malignant tumor mass, because the surgeon wouldn't cut it out, so
yeah.
I had to do that. And then it takes a while, from 6 to 9 months, routinely, of the thousands of people I've seen. Mm-hmm. It takes 6 to 8, 9 months to get rid of the worst part of the tumor mass.
Does the body go through a catabolic and then an anabolic cycle within a 24-hour period?
Yes, I determine metabolism. All metabolism is controlled, not part of it, not some of it, not almost all of it, but all metabolism is controlled by the autonomic nervous system. Mm-hmm. And the autonomic nervous system is a sympathetic dominant side and a parasympathetic dominant side. And you go through 2 cycles every day where your sympathetic or your energy cycle is, and then about 2:30 or 3 in the evening or afternoon, you have a parasympathetic cycle where your liver and pancreas produce, and you're kind of exhausted, and also and during that time the body repairs and heals, and then you have another cycle of energy, and then about 3:30 in the morning is the next parasympathetic cycle, or the loss of energy cycle. Mm-hmm. And where the repair and rebuilding take place.
Right.
So it's been quite an interesting thing, and to accept this repair and rebuilding cycle, because everybody wants to go all the time in our society.
Have energy all the time.
Right, but it doesn't work that way. And probably the Mexicans or the Spanish people have their siestas are based basically on the parasympathetic cycle, or the parasympathetic metabolism cycle.
Yeah. So in America, we drink a cup of coffee at 2 o'clock in the afternoon instead of taking a nap.
Right. Instead of goofing off and repairing and rebuilding, you just keep pushing.
So the cycle actually happens twice a day then, the rebuilding cycle, and then the
2:30 in the afternoon and 3:30 in the morning. Is basically what it does.
I'm sure that makes a lot of sense to people who tend to be a little tired around that time in the afternoon.
Right. So you're repairing and rebuilding your body at that time.
At the point that you had been diagnosed with cancer, there were several other very eminent scientists who had done research. Had you gone back and had looked at some of the work of say, Linus Pauling or?
Well, yes, Linus Pauling, actually, when his wife got cancer, why, he thought that all his vitamin C would cure her, and it doesn't. It misses the whole scientific paradigm of cancer.
Yeah.
And I told him what to do, but he wouldn't do it, and it killed her, of course. And then he killed himself with his vitamin C. The vitamin C is, the intravenous vitamin C is pretty dangerous or damaging to the body. And it's a synthetic vitamin, and it doesn't work. Neither does anything else, except our paradigm accounts for all the successes and all the failures of all therapies, whether it's radiation, X-ray, surgery, vitamin C, or anything else. Whenever you have a malignant condition, these therapies work in relation to the fact that they take the load off of the pancreas, or they take, whether it's a large tumor mass they surgically remove, or they do chemotherapy. Then it takes the less pancreatin to clean up the body and to heal the body. And so that, and we do recommend surgery and chemotherapy, and sometimes radiation if the tumor masses are causing a crisis, like a paralyzation, like a cancer in the spine or something. Doing radiation will temporarily keep it from spreading, and it will temporarily relieve it. But it's not the solution. It isn't the scientific paradigm that's required to cure cancer.
Yeah. One of the interesting things that I've read was that the enzymes, which are, of course, the component part of breaking down the proteins, are regenerated or made from the amino acids, which are the component parts of the protein. So
Right.
it's a chain. It's a loop that has to be fulfilled.
You have to have protein, and we in our during our active crisis therapy part of our program, we recommend a couple eggs a day for protein, and nuts and seeds, and some grains. But you have to have some protein to make your enzymes. So,
Is it true that the body actually regenerates a lot of the proteins that are part of the catabolic phase of the body?
well,
Of the metabolism?
I'm sure it does. I don't have any scientific evidence to that, but I'm sure it does. It reformulates from the amino acids.
What are the activators, Dr. Kelley, that you mentioned in terms of activating the pancreatin from the pancreas that happens, I guess, in the small intestine?
Right. Alkaline glands are the pancreas, the liver, and the duodenum. And the pancreas secretes a solution called peptones. And the peptones have to be activated before they form enzymes. If they weren't activated, then the enzymes, if it was in the pancreas, would digest the pancreas and destroy it. And this is what happens in cystic fibrosis and pancreatitis. Those two things happen. The pancreatin gets blocked. The peptone from the pancreas production gets blocked, and then it finally converts into an enzyme and destroys their own pancreas. And this is a tragic thing. But as the peptones leave the pancreas in the common bile duct to the small intestine, then the small intestine produces at least two that we know of enzyme activators that convert the peptone that's produced, the peptones are the pre-enzyme factors that are produced by the pancreas, into pancreatin, and then it's digested through the intestinal wall and goes throughout the body and attacks any defective cells, whether it's dead red blood cells or anything else.
Well, one of the questions in talking to a conventional doctor that about ingesting exogenous enzymes is they said that the enzyme molecule is actually too large to be absorbed through the intestine. So when somebody takes an exogenous enzyme like pancreatin and it improves the digestion, do those exogenous enzymes actually get into the bloodstream? Or
yes, that's a fraud developed by the medical community, our common enemy, that the Wilson Company in the 1940s proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, they had to go to Mexico to do it, that the actual pancreatin developed by the enzymes that you take by mouth actually go through the intestinal wall, and that's one of the tricks that the establishment used to keep people from taking enzymes and saying it doesn't work. And they have a lot of tricks up their sleeves, but that was one of their first ones. They said it didn't work, and of course it was proven, but they suppressed all that data, and the proof there's been suppressed.
Yeah. I'm always surprised at the lack of care that we give to the gastrointestinal tract in terms of our overall general health, that it's taken for granted, just as most of the food that we put into our mouths is given very little thought.
Right. We don't do have any, we just expect it to work and never think anything about it. And the medical community should be on top of that, but they're not.
Yeah.
They're on top of your pocketbook, but not your digestion,
Yeah.
and not your illness.
Well, let's go back to the 60s then for a few moments. And you say it took you about 18 months to resolve yourself of...
Well, I think I was going to make it without any...
Okay.
Right.
Well, you realized you weren't going to die from this disease.
Right.
You were going to...
I was going to survive, anyhow.
Yeah. Did you go back to your two friends that were doctors? What happened to them in this story?
As soon as I was diagnosed, I didn't take any more new patients, and then I moved to a little town in Central Texas, Grapevine, which is near about 5 miles from the airport, the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, and started helping people that all of my orthodontic patients had relatives that had problems, whether there's arthritis or emphysema or allergies or anything else. And so when I was surviving, why, they sent all their friends and enemies to see me, and I never did go back to Midland. And I'd go back every 2 or 3 weeks, just long enough to adjust the children's braces that I had at the time, but I never, then within a year or 18 months, maybe 16, 18 months, so I closed that office down.
And you relocated to
Grapevine, Texas.
To Grapevine. How far is Grapevine from Midland?
Oh, it's about 300 miles.
Oh, okay. So it's a ways.
It's a long ways from Midland.
Yeah. So then, at that point, obviously, your life had changed.
Yeah, considerably.
And, considerably.
Yeah, God got my attention real quick.
Yeah, and so you moved out of the orthodontics.
And just did nutritional counseling.
And did nutritional counseling. Arthritis is a huge problem today, as there are several things that, allergies, for instance, seem to be on the rise. Is that something that, is this true that allergies seem to be more common today than they were 30, 40 years ago?
Oh, yes. Everything is more, actually, we're being poisoned by our food chain, plus the medications, where everybody's on medications of some kind.
Yeah.
We're being poisoned by that. We're being poisoned by the chemtrails that the federal government dumps on us almost daily. And vaccinations are actually, in vaccinations and in the chemtrail that the government's using on us right now, they take aborted human tissue and they plant the tissue, like if they want you to have a cancer in your pancreas, they will take this aborted human tissue and lace it with a biological warfare agent and give it to your children as a vaccination against mumps, measles, or anything else. And they force you to do this, and it actually causes, it'll actually kill the person. They've got a time to where they can decide when they want it, where they want your cancer, whether it's in the brain. The big thing now is brain cancer and prostate cancer and esophageal cancer. That's what they're working on now to cause. They cause this. And so they can tell you right now, the federal government can tell you exactly how many people in what year is going to have diabetes, and how many are going to have pancreatic cancer, how many are going to have prostate cancer, how many is going to have lung cancer. And it's all planned by their using the famous old homeopathic procedure, like treats like. And so they take the human blood and human tissue from these various glands and tag it with a biological warfare agent to destroy those glands and to cause it irritated to the point that it forms a malignant tumor mass. And basically, as we are aware of the Gulf War syndrome and fibromyalgia, these are all biological warfare agents that are being used against us.
Right, right. What is the difference between a malignant tumor and a benign tumor?
A benign tumor is just a tumor mass of normal cells that are just going out of control. Malignant tumor has to have it's actually a malignant tumor is a placenta. The benign tumors are not responsive to enzymes at all. And so you have to either cut off, surgically remove them, radiate them, or you cut off the blood supply. There's new techniques now that are used to cut off the blood supply by injecting a clotting agent or an agent that expands. Like if you have a uterine fibroid tumor, they'll, through the technology, they can take a camera and go and the blood vessel down to the uterus and where the fibroid tumor is, and they inject it with a material that forms a mass that blocks the blood supply to that tumor, and then the tumor will, of course, die.
The benign tumor.
Yeah.
Why are benign tumors not? Why aren't they affected by the enzymes?
Because they're normal tissue. And enzymes don't affect normal tissue. They only affect placental tissue or trophoblast cells, which is actually the
Foreign.
actually a process of reproducing life, and it's the asexual part of forming life, and the body has to form these placenta cells in order to give the new baby hold the baby into the uterus to start off with, and also to develop a blood supply. So they're invasive, and they're not normal somatic tissue, so they can easily be destroyed by the enzymes, which that's the normal process of enzymes, is to clean up any foreign tissue. And you have about 90 million red blood cells that die every hour in your body, and these enzymes have to go in and clean those up, right, and to take them out of the body. And it does the same thing with any other dead abnormal tissue or normal tissue that's destroyed.
Well, if cancer is begun by a hormonal reaction in the body's inadequate protein or pancreatic metabolism doesn't clean it up, what is it that triggers the hormonal reaction?
Basically, it is every area in your body about the size of a pinhead has two of these trophoblast cells, which are actually sex cells that are on whenever you're in a glob in your mother's womb, why these sex cells migrate to the ovaries or the testes, and in the process of migrating through this mass called a future baby, then they get lodged in these different areas, and later in life, generally after 60, or now it's getting even after 30 or 20, these cells are triggered by female hormones, and they start forming they form a placenta to develop for a new baby. And that's where it all starts. And this is common knowledge in the medical community, but they certainly don't want this information out.
But for a male, what is it that he has to do to trigger this hormonal? Is it an ingestion of female hormones?
No. Everybody has both male and female hormones in their body, and the male has the female hormone also. That I don't remember all the details, but you have female hormones, and that trigger the cancer in the male. An injury will trigger it to stimulate these trophoblast cells to start forming a placenta, and injury will actually stimulate the hormone from the to stimulate the trophoblast cells.
The insulin would
The hormones from the hormones, female hormones, are stimulated by injury, or whether it's a piece of tar on your lung, or whether your wife hit you over the head with a rolling pin or something. You have an injury and then the body has to go in and clean it up. Well, some of these injuries stimulate these trophoblast cells to start forming a placenta, and that's where it all starts.
You said that a great deal of cancer could be prevented in the first place just by changing the time of day that you eat protein. Why is that? Why should protein be eaten before 1 p.m. in the afternoon?
Well, if you eat it at basically a 4 or 5 hour period, then the rest of the day, particularly at 2:30 in the afternoon, whenever the pancreas turns on to start repairing and rebuilding your body, then it produces more enzymes during that time to digest and clean up the debris within the body.
So it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. I don't know what it's like here in Kansas. I know that living in Newfoundland and living in British Columbia, living in Arizona, that every town has different types of foods that are available. I know that living on the West Coast in Vancouver right now, it's quite easy to get organic foods. It's easy to find fresh vegetable juices out in the store. But for the rest of America, what's it like here in Kansas in terms of eating a healthy organic diet?
Well, I don't. In our town, it's almost impossible. There may be some organic foods in the biggest town in Kansas, which is Wichita, but generally we don't have that unless you grow it yourself. And a lot of people do grow it themselves.
Yeah. You want to take a break for 5 minutes, and I want to review some of the other things I have at my computer there. I had to write a few things down because I knew it would be difficult to interview you, to try to follow to take the audience through a logical train of thought. There's so many areas that I wanted to cover with you, but. So what I think I'll do is just keep a list here. I've got a couple of things that I did want to talk about, and I knew that's why I wanted to be here for 2 days, because I knew I'd never sit down with you in a solid hour and get everything that I wanted to get. But I wanted to ask your thoughts on, right now, I guess breast cancer and prostate cancer are the two most common cancers in men and women.
Right.
Is there any particular reason why breast and prostate cancer would be the most common?
Yes, they're planned by the establishment, or a common enemy, to do this. By their aborted human tissue, they can tag wherever they want a cancer to develop, and they can tag the timing whenever they want it to develop. And so those are been around a long time. It's actually caused by the medical establishment.
Why would they want to create this problem?
Well, if they take like Jesse James and put on a mask and have a .45 in your hand and go walk into the bank and rob it, that's kind of against the law. And so the establishment is being quite creative that they are in wickedness and lawlessness, decided if they can force you to take a vaccination that will cause your cancer, then you will voluntarily run as fast as you can to the medical doctor, to the Orthodox community, and then you will take the recommended treatment, and then they will plunder you and plunder everything you have, and they don't even get credit for it. That's the problem. And they don't want credit for it, they just want the money.
Yeah.
And so that's essentially what happens.
But I mean, if you drive through the United States like I have done several times, I mean, you get the sense that we're not living in a particularly healthful society. I mean, did they really need to instigate this problem artificially?
They do both. They do it with genetic and engineered foods, plus
Yeah.
the vaccination, plus the chemtrails. This is all a planned attack on the actually the pocketbook and the health, and it's actually murder and plunder in a very deceitful, creative way. So,
In terms of in asking that question, I had thought that perhaps the answer had something to do with the hormonal influence on cancer, that the breast in the woman and the prostate in the man.
well, we take a lot of hormonal foods, foods that are milk products, one, and the hormonal stimulated proteins from beef, cattle, and so forth. But that's a minor cause of it.
When I know in part of the treatment you recommend raw glandulars. So in taking raw glandulars like liver or kidney, this actually helps the body to rebuild those cells.
Right. Actually, those raw, particularly liver, has products or has nutrients in it that we don't even know exist today, and that is quite helpful. And a lot of people have been so brainwashed that they think that liver is a source of all toxins. And the liver does process the toxins in the body, but the liver also cleans itself out, and then the glandulars that you take from the liver are basically detoxified because the body takes it out. That's a part of the misinformation that comes into our society in the health food world, actually.
Well, how does the body deal with if you're eating cow's meat, which has been, I guess, fed hormones to grow the cattle? How does the body deal with that? It doesn't take it out like a foreign toxin.
Well, it does process it and take it out through the liver and kidneys, the hormones, and like any other excess hormone. So it's not as big a problem as we'd like to believe, but it is a problem.
Yeah. Organic meats, I guess, wouldn't have the hormones. They're not fed.
Most of it they don't, but the availability of them is quite difficult to obtain, and so we have problems with that.
In eating organ meats, I know most people wouldn't be able to stomach raw liver like you suggest.
Right. Well, what I did, the alternative wasn't very nice to consider either, so I just blended the raw liver up in a blender and mixed it with some juice, carrot juice, tomato juice, or V8 juice, something like that, and held my nose and kicked and squealed and screamed and got it down. And sometimes I couldn't do it, and I just cut it in small pieces and freeze it and swallow it like a tablet.
Yeah. In cooking it, do you lose anything besides the enzymes? I guess if there are things in the liver that
Probably
we don't...
eat viable nutrients that we don't know exist.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess in the wild, I'd heard that the lion, when it kills its prey, eats the organ meat first.
Right, they'll eat the liver. The Eskimos, whenever they're doing their big run with their dog sleds, that's the food that they give their dogs to give them energy and strength, as they give them liver.
Give them the liver meat.
And that's correct. It has the most nutrients in the glandulars.
You mentioned also in the book that the actual attacking of the metastases in the body takes really from 3 hours to 12 days, but the real process is the cleanup process, the detox.
Right. Your enzymes can attack stop a malignant tumor growth, and then it has to be digested and taken out of the body, and you can't digest it to the point that it'll kill you from toxins, so it takes a long time to do that. Actually, this was first discovered in 1888 by a Scottish embryologist, where that's the girls that would actually, in the female population figured that they were wise enough to understand if you got pregnant, your breast cancer or anything other cancer you had would resolve within so many during the pregnancy. And so a girl that had cancer would try to get pregnant, whether she had to trip a boy in the meadow or whether attack him with a cake or something, whatever he did, but so they could get pregnant whenever they had cancer. Actually, the Scottish embryologist John Baird found that on the 7th week, the baby's pancreas starts forming, starts producing enzymes. And the enzymes produced by the baby and the mother resolve most of the cancers during the pregnancy. And then so when these ladies that had cancer could not any longer become pregnant, they would die from malignant tumors. And that's what, by 1911 or 1900, between 1900 and 1911, they started injecting enzymes directly into the muscle tissue, like in your hip or something, and give you extra enzymes, and that was successful in a lot of cases. Actually, in 1900, we had 1 person in 8,000 who had cancer. Today, or actually in November 1998, the government announced that 1 out of every 2 men have cancer now today, and 2 out of every 3 women now today have cancer. So our war on cancer is a total surrender. Actually, it's not a war. It's a fraud, actually.
Well, Richard Nixon declared war on cancer while he was in term, and he said that within 5 years they would have a cure. But
well, the war on cancer was a fraud to the American public to fleece us. What they actually did, they took this money for the cancer research and did the biological research and biological warfare agents, and that's what developed the AIDS was developed at the Fort Detrick, and all the other fibromyalgia, all the multiple diseases that the doctors don't even know exist or how to treat right now was developed by conning the American public into believing they were supporting the war on cancer, and they had no intention of even looking into cancer, and they still don't. And the American Cancer Society is, you just can't give them enough money. It's kind of like the grave. You never get enough, so they just keep asking for more and more, and same with the National Cancer Institute, and they have no intention of finding a cure for cancer, and they will suppress any cure that actually develops.
are there any other countries that are having a better, making more progress than the Americans?
Oh, I don't know that. I doubt they do, because it's basically all controlled by the medical establishments, which is quite lawless and wicked and diabolical, actually.
Other than the chemotherapy and radiation and surgery, I guess there's a couple of treatments now that are not widely recommended, but aren't blacklisted like they used to be. If I recall in my reading, hydrogen sulfate can be requested now by the patient. Is this
Hydrogen sulfate is jet fuel,
Yeah.
and it actually stops. It doesn't treat the cancer. It stops the wasting away of a person who, when you have cancer, the body needs the nutrition to maintain life, and so the body just digests itself. The hydrogen sulfate stops the auto-digestion of your own body. And it doesn't work in all cases, but it works in enough cases to justify that.
So when somebody wastes away, how do you pronounce it? The catharsis or whatever.
Catharsis, yeah.
Catharsis. So when a body has cancer spread throughout it, but you're not digesting any protein because I guess there are no enzymes. The enzyme metabolism is non-existent. So the cancer, having almost its own life force, is drawing or taking
the nutrients from the available tissue, which is, you know, various proteins, any nutrients that's already digested and in cells. Basically, the white blood cells go in and dissolve them, and the cancer feeds on that. The tumors feed on that.
This makes sense to me in thinking of it in terms of how it's the embryonic or the trophoblast cell, and the fact that it's almost got its own consciousness, that life,
Right.
its own life is the priority, is the paramount priority. So it's taking from the host.
Right. It has to, once to form a new baby, it has to get ready for a new life, and it'll do anything to develop, to prepare for a new life force. Mm-hmm. And of its own, it's that's the way we're designed. And with all the research, we know that. It's just that it's unacceptable, socially unacceptable to treat cancer, actually, because cancer is simply the failure of the pancreas to produce adequate enzymes and deliver them to the site of trophoblast cells. It's simply what cancer is.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah. And all the white coats and MRIs and everything else is just a stage, like you're in Hollywood or in a New York play, putting on a show for us.
Yeah. I was told years ago that in China you pay your doctor while you're healthy. As soon as you get sick, you don't pay him anymore, because that's his job, to keep you healthy.
Right. That's probably a pretty good idea. But we would have a lot of starving doctors in this country if that was the rule here.
Yeah. So, a couple other questions I wanted to ask, and this comes directly from I think my mother. In the almond diet, is it best to soak the almonds and remove the skin, or is it,
It doesn't matter. It's soaking them, if you soak them overnight, it tends to start a sprouting effect, and there's some nutrients or additional value from the sprouting part of the almond. Yep.
Well, I guess seeds and even some nuts, and maybe,
Right.
is almond is a nut.
Yeah.
In sprouting it removes that enzyme prohibitor.
Right.
So that it's more nutritious, and your body can
use it better, and it probably has its own enzymes to help digest it, that sort of thing.
So that's the same case with almonds and maybe some other nuts as well.
Right.
You can soak them.
You can soak them and start them sprouting.
Yeah.
But I use a lot of grains. I have a mixture of all the organic grains I can con the health food store into providing for me, and then I mix them into a batch and put about 1/3 of a cup in a bowl and cover it with hot water, about a cup of hot water. And the next morning it's starting to sprout, and you can eat it that way, or you can cook it like or eat it like you would an oatmeal, or a double boiler type of thing. And it's a good source of food.
Yeah, I've eaten that many times. In fact, it's only the last few months that I've gotten out of making that. It's actually very good to mix those grains, and I let it soak overnight in some cherry juice.
Right.
Which so I don't cook it at all. You recommend or say that you can actually put a cup of boiling water over it, which I guess will soften it.
It'll soften it and start the sprouting process.
Even with boiling water, so the boiling water won't kill
I don't think it'll kill them. It doesn't seem to.
Yeah.
But you don't have to use boiling water.
A lot of people these days, I don't know too many people are doing coffee enemas, but colonics seem to be on the rise. What are your thoughts on?
Well, colonic is helpful in it removes some of the waste products, but the objective of the coffee enemas, first of all, before I was born, it was standard procedure, and it was in the medical literature, the Merck manual, and so forth. The coffee enema causes the violent contraction of the gallbladder, which dumps all the bile out and allows the liver to dump more bile into the gallbladder, which allows the blood to dump more debris into the liver, which allows the cells to dump more debris into the blood. And that's one of the best ways of cleaning out. In addition, the coffee enema makes you feel a little better, and it's the best form of pain relief. It's better than codeine or morphine for pain. And also, it's a diuretic, which helps the kidneys to eliminate toxins from the kidneys. So it's a effective procedure to do.
After the coffee enema, is it necessary to refluoridate the colon with acidophilus and lactoflora?
No, you can do anything you want to, but it's impossible, totally impossible to sterilize the intestinal tract. I know whenever Dr. Morrison's father, they were murdering him, we tried to, with the anthrax that they put in our enzymes during that time, we tried to sterilize the intestinal tract to stop the anthrax bacteria. And we had Dr. Robert Good of Sloan Kettering who developed the bone marrow transplant, and they've used antibiotics to clean out to sterilize the person so they can do a bone marrow. And so and it costs about $10,000 a day to use these antibiotics, and you have to use them for a week or so, and you still can't sterilize the intestinal tract. You might get some form of less desirable bacteria, but it'll eventually get back to where it belongs, and you cannot desterilize your intestinal tract.
Well, it's hypothetically then, if you do sterilize the intestinal tract, where does the good bacteria come from?
Well, basically from your food chain.
Okay. So you have to,
You can either do some food chain, some organic foods and so forth, or you can eat yogurt or anything you want to. You can add there's several schools of thought on which bacteria is the best and which culture is the best, but you cannot sterilize your intestinal tract.
I think these tapes are almost out.